7 words. That's all it took. 7 words from a broke waitress to a billionaire who could destroy her with a phone call. Everyone in that restaurant thought she'd just committed career suicide. They thought she was crazy. They had no idea she was about to bring down a 20-year-old empire built on lies. But here's the twist that'll blow your mind. The man she stood up to? He wasn't her enemy. He was the only person trying to save her. And the frail old man in the wheelchair, who looked like he couldn't hurt a fly? He was the monster who destroyed her mother's life and was about to push her off a building. I know you think you know where this is going. You don't. Because what happened next didn't just shock a room full of millionaires. It exposed a secret that sent a powerful man to prison and cleared an innocent woman's name after 2 decades. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stay silent when the whole world expects you to disappear. This is the night everything changed. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know, sometimes the biggest moments in our lives start in the most ordinary ways. This is a story about courage, about standing up when everything inside you is screaming to stay quiet. It's about a young woman named Sarah who learned that sometimes the people we hate the most might be hiding the truth we desperately need to hear. Let me take you back to that night. Picture the most expensive restaurant you can imagine in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers hanging from 20-foot ceilings. White tablecloths so crisp they could cut paper. The kind of place where a single bottle of wine costs more than most people make in a month. This was the Pearl, and if you worked there, you learned one golden rule fast: be invisible. Sarah had been working at the Pearl for 7 months. Every night, she'd put on that black uniform, tie her hair back tight, and walk through those heavy doors into a world that wasn't hers. She was 25 years old, carrying student loan debt that kept her up at night, living in a tiny apartment where the heat barely worked. But she showed up. She smiled. She poured wine and cleared plates and pretended she didn't exist. Because that's what they wanted. The rich people at those tables, they didn't want to see her as human. They wanted her to be a shadow, a robot, something that appeared when they needed something and vanished when they didn't. That night started like any other. The restaurant was packed with Chicago's elite, politicians, lawyers, real estate moguls. And at table 7, the best table in the house, sat a man named Daniel Cross. Everyone knew Daniel Cross. He was the kind of rich that most people can't even imagine. He owned half the luxury hotels in America. His face was on magazine covers. People said he could make or break careers with a single phone call. He was 50 years old, handsome in that cold, calculated way, with silver hair and eyes that looked right through you. Sitting across from him was a younger man in an expensive suit, sweating like he'd just run a marathon. Daniel was shouting at him. Not just talking loud, shouting. His voice carried across the entire restaurant. "I don't care about your excuses, Brandon." Daniel slammed his fist on the table, making the wine glasses jump. "I told you to handle the Jakarta property deal. If those permits aren't approved by Friday, I will personally make sure you never work in real estate again. You'll be selling timeshares in Florida for the rest of your miserable life." The whole restaurant went quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died. Everyone was watching, but everyone was also pretending not to watch. That's how it works in places like this. Sarah was standing at the service station, holding a bottle of wine that cost $3,000. Her manager, a thin man named Henry with nervous eyes, nodded at her. "Table 7 needs a refill," he whispered. "Be careful. Mr. Cross is in a mood." Sarah's heart was pounding as she walked toward that table. She'd served Daniel Cross before. He'd never looked at her once. Never said thank you. Never acknowledged she was human. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, he felt dangerous. She approached the table carefully, holding the bottle with both hands. "Excuse me, Mr. Cross," she said softly. "Would you like more wine?" Daniel whipped his head around so fast it startled her. His eyes were wild with rage. "Do I look like I want more wine?" he snapped. "I'm in the middle of saving a $100 million deal, and you're interrupting me like some kind of vulture." Sarah took a step back. "I'm sorry, sir. I just thought." "You thought?" Daniel stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. The entire restaurant was dead silent now. "You're not paid to think. You're paid to pour drinks and disappear. You're the help. You're nothing." He said it so casually, like it was just a fact. Like she wasn't a person with dreams and fears and a mother she was trying to take care of. Like she was just Nothing. And something inside Sarah broke. Not in a sad way. In a different way. Like a lock clicking open. Like chains falling off. She set that $3,000 bottle of wine down on the table. Not gently, firmly. Deliberately. And she stood up straight, looked Daniel Cross right in his cold eyes, and said something that would change both of their lives forever. "Speak to me like that again," she said, her voice quiet but carrying through the silent room like a bell. "And I will walk away from this table, and you can pour your own wine." You could have heard a pin drop. Henry, her manager, looked like he was having a heart attack. The man across from Daniel looked terrified. And Daniel Cross just stared at her, his mouth slightly open, like no one had ever said no to him in his entire life. "What did you just say to me?" Daniel whispered, his voice dripping with danger. Sarah's hands were shaking, but she didn't back down. "I said, I'm serving you dinner, Mr. Cross. I'm not your punching bag. I don't care how many hotels you own or how much money you have. You will treat me with respect, or you will do without my service." Henry rushed over, his face red. "Mr. Cross, I am so sorry. Sarah, you're fired. Get out. Now." But Daniel held up one hand. He was still staring at Sarah with this strange expression. Not angry anymore. Something else. Curious. Almost impressed? "Stop," Daniel said to Henry. Then he looked at Sarah. "Sit down." And that's when everything changed. Sarah stood there frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Did he just tell her to sit down? At his table? With him? "I'm sorry, what?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. Daniel gestured to the empty chair where the sweating man had been sitting. "Oh, that man, Brandon." He'd already grabbed his briefcase and practically ran out of the restaurant. Apparently, being fired by Daniel Cross in public was enough humiliation for one night. "I said sit down," Daniel repeated, his voice calmer now. He looked at Henry, who was still hovering nervously. "Bring another glass. The lady is dining with me." Henry looked like he might faint. "Mr. Cross, I really don't think." "I don't pay you to think either, Henry," Daniel said coldly. "Bring the glass. Now." Henry scurried away, and Sarah found herself slowly lowering into the most expensive chair she'd ever touched. The velvet was soft. The whole table smelled like money, expensive cologne, truffle oil, aged wine. She felt completely out of place in her waitress uniform. Daniel poured wine into his own glass, then filled the one Henry nervously placed in front of Sarah. His hands were steady, confident, like a man who'd never doubted himself in his life. "Drink," Daniel said. "I'm working," Sarah replied. "Not anymore. I just hired you." Sarah blinked. "Excuse me." Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her face like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "That man who just ran out of here? Brandon? He's been working for me for 3 years. Smart guy. Ivy League education. Knows real estate inside and out. But do you know what his problem was?" Sarah shook her head. "He was afraid of me," Daniel said simply. "Every time I asked his opinion, he just agreed with whatever I said. Every time I made a decision, he told me I was brilliant. He was useless. A yes man. A puppet." He took a sip of wine, never breaking eye contact with Sarah. "But you," he continued, "you just stood up to me in front of 50 people. You risked your job, your income, everything, just to tell me I was being rude. That takes guts. That takes something Brandon will never have." Sarah's mind was racing. Where was this going? Was this some kind of test? Some kind of game rich people played? "Mr. Cross, I don't understand what you want from me," she said honestly. Daniel smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark. "I have a meeting in exactly 15 minutes. A man named Victor Kane is walking through that door, and I need to convince him to sell me the mining rights to a massive rare earth mineral deposit in Nevada. If I get those rights, my company's value triples overnight. If I don't, my investors will pull their money, and I'll lose everything by Monday. I still don't understand what this has to do with me," Sarah said, her voice small. "Victor Kane is a predator," Daniel explained. "He's spent 40 years in business, and he's destroyed everyone who's ever tried to negotiate with him. He has a tell when he's lying. Everyone does, but he's so good at hiding it that I've never been able to catch it. I need fresh eyes. I need someone who isn't impressed by his reputation. Someone who can watch him carefully and tell me when he's bluffing." Sarah stared at him. "You want me to help you negotiate a business deal? I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about mining or rare earth minerals or—" "I don't need you to know about mining," Daniel interrupted. "I need you to read people. You've been reading people your entire life, haven't you? Figuring out which customers are generous and which ones are jerks. Who's having a bad day? Who's going to tip well? That's a skill, Sarah. A valuable one. He leaned forward, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. Something almost desperate. Help me tonight, he said quietly. Watch Victor Kane. Tell me when he's lying. If I get this deal done, I'll pay you $250,000. Cash. Tonight. Sarah felt dizzy. $250,000. That would pay off her student loans. That would cover her mother's medical bills. That would change her entire life. But there was something he wasn't telling her. She could feel it. Why me? She asked, searching his face. You could hire a professional negotiator. A psychologist. Someone trained for this. Why would you trust a waitress you just met? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made Sarah's blood run cold. Because you remind me of someone, he said softly. Someone I failed a long time ago. And maybe helping you is a way to make up for that. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, the restaurant's heavy front doors opened. A wheelchair rolled in, pushed by a woman in a blood-red dress. The woman was beautiful in a terrifying way. Cold eyes, sharp features, moving with the precision of a trained killer. And in the wheelchair sat an old man, thin as a skeleton, wearing dark sunglasses even though they were indoors. Victor Kane had arrived. Sarah watched as they approached the table. The old man's head was tilted to one side, and his hands trembled with what looked like Parkinson's disease. He looked frail, harmless, like a strong wind could blow him away. But Sarah had been reading people her whole life, like Daniel said. And something about Victor Kane made every instinct in her body scream danger. Show time, Daniel whispered to her. Don't let me down. Sarah picked up her wine glass with trembling hands. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to. But she knew somehow that nothing in her life would ever be the same. The woman in the red dress locked the wheelchair at the head of the table. She didn't smile, didn't introduce herself, just placed a leather folder on the table with a heavy thud and stood behind the old man like a guard. Daniel stood up, extending his hand. Victor, I didn't think you'd come in person. I'm honored. The old man didn't respond, didn't move. His head stayed tilted at that strange angle, his hands continuing their rhythmic tremor. For a moment, Sarah wondered if he was even conscious. My father doesn't speak to desperate men anymore, the woman said, her voice like ice scraping glass. I'm Rebecca Kane. I'll be handling the negotiations. Daniel nodded slowly, sitting back down. Of course. Rebecca, it's been a while. Since the Miami conference, I think. Since you tried to undercut us on the Indonesian deal, Rebecca corrected coldly. She sat down across from them, not even glancing at Sarah. To her, Sarah was furniture. Invisible. Sarah sat perfectly still, trying to make herself small. But her eyes were working. Watching. She looked at Victor Kane, studying him the way she'd learned to study difficult customers. Something wasn't right. His tremor was steady. Too steady. Like a metronome. Real tremors from Parkinson's aren't that regular. They come and go, they get worse with stress. Her mother's friend had Parkinson's, and Sarah remembered how unpredictable it was. Let's not waste time, Rebecca said, opening the leather folder. You want the Nevada mining rights. You need them to satisfy your debts to your investors. Without this deal, Cross Hotels goes under by Monday morning. Am I missing anything? Daniel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. You're missing the part where you need my extraction technology. You have the land, but you can't mine rare earth minerals with equipment from the 1990s. Without me, that deposit stays in the ground, worthless. We have other offers, Rebecca said smoothly. Tech companies in Silicon Valley. International mining firms. You're not our only option, Daniel. Then why are you here on a Friday night? Daniel challenged. If you had better offers, you'd have taken them already. Rebecca smiled. It was a cruel smile. The price is $500 million. And we want 60% control of the joint operation. 60%? Daniel almost laughed. That leaves me with nothing. I need 51% minimum to make this work for my investors. Then your investors will be disappointed, Rebecca said, starting to close the folder. We're leaving. You have 5 minutes to accept our terms or we walk. Sarah watched this back and forth like a tennis match. But her eyes kept drifting back to Victor Kane. Something about him was wrong. Then she saw it. A waiter accidentally bumped into a nearby table, and a water glass tipped over. Rebecca flinched at the sudden noise, just for a split second. And in that moment, Victor Kane's left hand stopped trembling. Completely. His index finger tapped the armrest of his wheelchair once, twice. A signal. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He was faking it. The frail old man act was just that, an act. He was completely aware, completely in control, and he was feeding Rebecca instructions. She leaned close to Daniel and whispered, barely moving her lips. He's not sick. Watch his left hand. Daniel's eyes flickered toward Victor. He saw it too, the deliberate tap, the momentary stillness. What else? Daniel whispered back. Sarah studied Rebecca. She's sweating. Just a little at her hairline. Her hands are shaking when she touches the folder. They're bluffing. They don't have other buyers. They need you as badly as you need them. Daniel's whole expression changed. The desperation disappeared, replaced by cold confidence. He leaned back in his chair and smiled at Rebecca. No, he said simply. Rebecca blinked. Excuse me? I said no. 500 million is fantasy. 60% is insulting. My offer is 300 million, and I want 65% control. Take it or leave it. Rebecca's face went pale. We're walking out of here, Daniel. This meeting is over. Walk then, Daniel said calmly. And when you do, I'll make a phone call to the Environmental Protection Agency. I'll tell them about the groundwater contamination reports you've been hiding. The ones that show the Nevada site is poisoning the water supply. Yes, I know about that. My team found the hidden reports an hour ago. Rebecca froze, her hand on the wheelchair. Victor's head lifted, just slightly. The mask was slipping. You're bluffing, Rebecca said, but her voice wavered. Try me, Daniel said. Walk out that door, and by tomorrow morning, your $500 million asset becomes a toxic waste site worth nothing. The EPA will shut you down, the lawsuits will bury you, and you'll spend the next 10 years in court. The silence at the table was crushing. Sarah could see Rebecca's mind racing, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. Sit down, Daniel said, his voice softer now. Let's talk like reasonable people. Rebecca slowly sat back down. For the next hour, Sarah watched Daniel systematically dismantle them. Every time Rebecca tried to pivot or lie, Sarah would tap Daniel's foot under the table or whisper a single word. Lying. Nervous. Weak. They agreed on 320 million. Daniel got 55% control. It was a complete victory. As the papers were being signed, Victor Kane spoke for the first time. His voice was dry, cracked like old leather. One condition. Everyone turned to look at him. I want to speak to her, Victor said, and his skeletal finger pointed directly at Sarah. Alone. 5 minutes. Outside. Sarah's heart stopped. Daniel's face went hard. She's not part of this deal, Victor. Then there is no deal, Victor rasped. 5 minutes, or I tear up these papers right now. Daniel looked at Sarah, concern in his eyes. You don't have to do this. But Sarah stood up, because she'd just realized something. Something that made her blood run cold. She knew that voice. That raspy, cruel voice. She'd heard it once before, on a phone call 10 years ago. The night her mother's life fell apart. I'll go, Sarah said quietly. I need to hear what he has to say. The restaurant's terrace was cold. Chicago wind cut through Sarah's thin uniform, making her shiver. The city lights spread out below them like fallen stars, and she could hear the distant sound of traffic, sirens. Life continuing far below while her world was about to shatter. Rebecca wheeled Victor to the edge of the terrace and locked the wheelchair in place. She gave Sarah one cold look, a warning, then went back inside, leaving them alone. Sarah walked to the railing and gripped it with both hands. She didn't want to look at him. Didn't want to give him the satisfaction. You know, Victor said, his voice stronger now, no longer weak and trembling. You look just like her. Same eyes. Same stubborn chin. Same fire. Sarah's hands tightened on the railing. Like who? Like your mother, of course, Victor said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Like Jennifer Hayes. Or does she still go by Thompson now? I forget. She changed her name after the scandal, didn't she? Tried to disappear. But you can't really disappear, can you? Not in the digital age. Sarah turned around slowly. Victor had removed his sunglasses. His eyes were sharp, clear, and full of malicious intelligence. No cloudiness. No confusion. He'd been faking everything. How do you know my mother? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Oh, Jennifer and I go way back, Victor said, rolling his wheelchair closer. 20 years ago, she was the chief financial officer at Kane Industries. Brilliant woman. One of the smartest people I'd ever met. She built our accounting systems, streamlined our operations, saved us millions. Sarah's mother had told her pieces of this story over the years, but never the whole truth. Never the real truth. And then, Victor continued, his voice hardening, she discovered I was stealing. Funneling money to offshore accounts. Bribing government officials. All the things that make business actually work in the real world. And your mother, with her precious morals and her ethical standards, she threatened to report me to the FBI. So you framed her, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. You planted evidence that made it look like she was the one stealing. You destroyed her career, her reputation, everything. She went to prison for 3 years for crimes you committed. I did what I had to do, Victor said without remorse. Business is war, Sarah. You eliminate threats. Your mother was a threat. Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She lost everything. Her job, her savings, her freedom. When she got out of prison, no one would hire her. We lost our house. I had to drop out of college to take care of her because the stress gave her a heart condition. She can barely work now. She lives in a tiny apartment, struggling to pay for her medications. And yet here you are, Victor said, tilting his head like a curious bird, helping Daniel cross. Do you know what Daniel did back then? Do you know his role in your mother's destruction? Sarah's breath caught. What? Daniel Cross was my business partner 20 years ago, Victor said, savoring every word like poison candy. He knew I was framing your mother. I told him exactly what I was planning. And do you know what he did? Nothing. He stayed silent. He protected himself and let an innocent woman go to prison. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought about Daniel inside, the man who'd just offered her $250,000. The man who'd stood up for her. The man she'd started to trust. You're lying, Sarah said, but her voice shook. Am I? Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photograph. He held it out to her. Sarah didn't want to take it, but her hand moved on its own. She looked at the picture. It showed 3 people on a yacht, laughing, holding champagne glasses. On the left was Daniel Cross, younger, handsome. In the middle was Victor Kane, standing tall and healthy. On the right was her mother, Jennifer, smiling, looking happy and successful. We were all friends once, Victor said quietly. Before the money corrupted everything. Before I made my choice and Daniel made his. Why are you telling me this? Sarah demanded, her voice cracking. Why now? Victor's smile was pure evil. Because I want you to know that the man you just helped in there, the man who's about to make billions from the deal you saved, he's the reason your mother's life was destroyed. He could have stopped me. He could have told the truth. But he chose his career over her freedom. Sarah felt like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. I don't believe you. Then ask him, Victor said. Go inside and ask Daniel Cross if he knew Jennifer Hayes. Ask him if he knew she was innocent. Ask him why he said nothing while she was handcuffed and taken away. Sarah's mind was reeling. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling. She'd spent 7 months working at this restaurant, hoping to somehow get close to Daniel Cross, to understand why her mother's life had fallen apart. And now she had her answer, but it was so much worse than she'd imagined. There's something else you should know, Victor said, and his voice dropped to a whisper. That mining deal Daniel just signed? The land is worthless. It's contaminated with arsenic and mercury. Completely unusable. But the reports I showed him were fake. I created clean versions to hide the real damage. By Monday, when his investors find out the truth, Cross Hotels will collapse. And Daniel Cross will lose everything, just like your mother did. Victor rolled his wheelchair closer, his face inches from Sarah's. So here's your choice, little girl. You can go inside and warn him. Save the man who destroyed your family. Or you can stay silent, just like he did 20 years ago. Let him fall. Let him lose everything. Let justice finally be served. He rolled back toward the door, then paused. Choose wisely, Sarah. You only get one chance to decide what kind of person you really are. Then he was gone, and Sarah was alone with the cold wind and an impossible choice. Sarah stood on that terrace, shaking. Not from the cold, from rage and confusion, and a pain so deep it felt like her chest was being torn open. All those years watching her mother struggle. Watching her take pills for a heart condition caused by stress and despair. Watching her apply for jobs only to be rejected the moment they ran a background check. Watching her cry in the bathroom when she thought Sarah couldn't hear, mourning the life she'd lost, the career that had been stolen, the reputation destroyed by lies. And Daniel Cross had known. He could have stopped it. He could have told the truth. But he'd stayed silent. He'd protected himself while Sarah's mother went to prison. Sarah pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She should call her mother. Ask her if it was true. But she already knew it was. Deep down, in that place where you know things before your brain catches up, she knew Victor wasn't lying about this. The terrace door opened. Daniel stepped out, his face etched with concern. "Sarah, are you all right? What did Victor say to you?" Sarah turned to face him. In the city lights, he looked different. Not like a powerful billionaire. Just like a man. A man who'd made choices. Choices that had consequences. "Did you know my mother?" Sarah asked quietly. Daniel went very still. The color drained from his face. "What?" "Jennifer Hayes. She worked at Kane Industries 20 years ago. Did you know her?" Daniel's jaw clenched. He looked away, out at the city lights, and Sarah had her answer even before he spoke. "Yes," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "I knew her. She was brilliant. Kind. One of the best people I'd ever worked with. And when Victor framed her for his crimes," Sarah continued, her voice getting stronger, harder. "When he planted evidence to make her look like a thief, when she went to prison for 3 years for something she didn't do, you knew she was innocent, didn't you?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Yes. And you said nothing." The words came out like bullets. "You stayed silent. You protected your career while an innocent woman's life was destroyed. While my mother's life was destroyed. Sarah, don't." She held up her hand. "Don't you dare make excuses. Do you know what happened to her? Do you know that she can barely work now because the stress damaged her heart? That she lives in poverty, taking medication she can barely afford? That I had to give up my education to take care of her?" Daniel's face was twisted with pain. "I know. I've known for years. I've been trying to find a way to make it right. Why do you think I recognized you the moment you stood up to me tonight?" Sarah blinked. "What? You think it was a coincidence that I asked you to help me?" Daniel moved closer, his voice urgent. "The second you told me your name was Sarah Thompson, I knew. I've been tracking Jennifer's life for 10 years, trying to figure out how to help without revealing what I knew, without putting her in more danger. Victor has people everywhere. If he'd known I was helping Jennifer, he would have hurt her to punish me. So instead you did nothing," Sarah said bitterly. "No," Daniel said firmly. "I did everything I could in secret. Who do you think has been anonymously paying some of your mother's medical bills for the past 5 years? Who do you think got the charges reduced so she only served 3 years instead of 10? Who do you think has been trying to gather evidence against Victor this entire time?" Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. "That was you." "It was," Daniel said. "I've spent 2 decades building a case against Victor Kane, collecting evidence, documenting his crimes. And tonight, with your help, I finally got him to expose himself on the Nevada deal. That folder Rebecca brought? I recorded the entire negotiation. I have Victor admitting to fraud, environmental crimes, everything. By Monday, he'll be the one in prison, not your mother." Sarah wanted to believe him. But trust had been shattered tonight, ground to dust like glass. Victor said the mining deal is fake. That the land is poisoned and worthless. That you'll lose everything when your investors find out. Daniel smiled grimly. "I know. I've known since yesterday. My team found the real contamination reports. The deal I just signed is worthless. You're right about that. But Victor doesn't know that I know. He thinks he's winning. He thinks he's about to destroy me. So what happens Monday?" Sarah asked, confused. "Monday morning, I announced that Cross Hotels is canceling the mining deal due to newly discovered environmental concerns," Daniel explained. "I take a small financial hit, but nothing catastrophic. And simultaneously, the FBI, who I've been working with for 6 months, arrests Victor Kane for fraud, environmental crimes, and conspiracy. They'll reopen your mother's case. With the evidence I've gathered, she'll be fully exonerated. Her record will be cleared. She'll be free." Sarah felt tears finally spill down her cheeks. "Why didn't you tell her? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because Victor is paranoid and ruthless," Daniel said softly. "If he'd known I was investigating him, he would have killed me. Or worse, he would have gone after the people I was trying to protect. People like your mother. People like you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This isn't the $250,000 I promised you for tonight. This is $2 million. It's a settlement payment from Cross Hotels to Jennifer Hayes for wrongful suffering and lost wages. It's not enough. It will never be enough to give her back the years she lost. But it's a start." Sarah took the envelope with shaking hands. I don't understand. If you were trying to help us, why did you let this go on so long? Because I was a coward, Daniel said, and his voice broke. 20 years ago, I was young and scared and ambitious. When Victor told me what he was going to do to your mother, I should have stood up to him. I should have gone to the authorities immediately. But I was terrified of losing everything I'd built. So I made a choice. A terrible, selfish choice. And I've regretted it every single day since. He looked at Sarah with eyes full of genuine remorse. I can't change the past. I can't give your mother back those years. But I've spent 2 decades trying to make it right. The recording from tonight, the evidence I've gathered, it's enough to put Victor away for the rest of his life. Your mother will be cleared. She'll be free. And she'll have the resources to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Sarah looked at the envelope. $2 million. Justice. Freedom. Everything her mother deserved. But it came from the man who'd let her suffer in the first place. Victor said I had a choice, Sarah said quietly. That I could warn you or stay silent. Let you fall like my mother fell. An eye for an eye. And what did you choose? Daniel asked. Sarah looked up at him. I chose to tell you the truth. Because that's what my mother would have done. Even after everything she's been through, she still believes in doing the right thing. She taught me that being good isn't about revenge. It's about breaking the cycle. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter. I know, Sarah said. And on Monday, when Victor Kane is arrested and my mother's name is cleared, I'm going to take this money and help her start over. We're going to open a small accounting firm together. We're going to help people like us, people who've been wronged by powerful corporations. And we're going to make sure that what happened to her never happens to anyone else. Daniel smiled. I'd like to be your first investor, if you'll have me. Sarah thought about it. About forgiveness and second chances. About the fact that people are complicated. Capable of both cowardice and courage, selfishness and sacrifice. We'll see, she said. First, let's make sure Victor Kane pays for what he did. They walked back inside together. The restaurant had emptied out. Victor and Rebecca were gone. But Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. Because she'd learned something important tonight. Standing up to cruelty doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it looks like a quiet waitress telling a powerful man he's wrong. Sometimes it looks like carrying the truth for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. Sometimes it looks like choosing to help someone who hurt you, because that's what breaks the cycle of pain. 3 months later, Sarah's mother stood in a courtroom and heard a judge officially clear her record. Victor Kane was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. And in a small office in downtown Chicago, a sign went up, Hayes and Thompson Accounting, honest work for honest people. Sarah never went back to being a waitress. But she never forgot what she learned that night at the Pearl. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. It's about standing up when everyone expects you to stay down. It's about finding your voice when the whole world wants you to stay silent. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about saying 7 simple words that change everything. Speak to me like that again, and I'll walk away. Because those words weren't just a warning. They were a declaration. A line in the sand. A moment when someone who'd been told she was nothing proved she was everything. That's the story. That's how a waitress named Sarah changed not just her own life, but brought down an empire built on lies. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's this. You are never too small, too young, or too powerless to stand up for what's right. Your voice matters. Your courage matters. You matter. Never forget that.